Welcome to Beanstalk, M&J's podcast where we are sharing and showcasing our areas of expertise through conversations with practice leaders on their knowledge and experience.
Well, welcome back to the Beanstalk podcast, where today I wouldn't necessarily say I'm excited to talk about what we have to talk about. Nobody loves getting mail or correspondence or anything from the IRS. But it's, as a taxpayer, naturally one of the things that we have to deal with and address. And I'm very fortunate to have somebody like Charlotte Way, who leads our tax controversy team here at Malden & Jenkins, to help us get us through this process. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
And for the listeners, can you please just go through a little bit of your background and what the tax controversy team does for taxpayers, for clients?
So my background is I actually am a CPA, and I got my CPA license, and then I went on to law school, and I went to the University of Virginia Law School and got my JD. And I always knew I wanted to do tax. I knew that the minute I was dealing with the CPA license. So I went on to New York University School of Law, and I got my master's in taxation law from there. So we literally spent a year dealing with controversy work, penalties, timing, learning how to deal with the IRS. And at that point, I knew my true calling, and what I wanted to do was help resolve taxpayers with their IRS controversy issues or audit matters.
Yep. And so, and the practice and procedure around just dealing with the IRS, I mean, it's so convoluted, and I don't think we're going to get into much of that today, right? But it is just kind of, hey, conceptually, here are the ways that the IRS, corresponds with you. Here are certain of the things that, that we have to deal with: penalties, interest, audits. And so I think we're not going to take necessarily a deep dive with any of that, but just kind of, hey, just simple to difficult, right? It's, we're getting letters from the IRS. What different scenarios can kind of cause taxpayers to get letters? And generally when you're getting something, it's, hey, you owe this, or, something's off. Like, can you kind of describe what generally triggers an IRS letter to come to your door?
Okay, so basically what happens is you will get a notice. And it's a good question, because when you get the notice, the first thing I want to say is a taxpayer is scared.
Yeah.
When they get a notice from the IRS, it's scary.
It's terrible.
What's wrong? Yes. And
I'm in the field, and I still don't like.
And so to explain, our TCR team, and I really didn't get into that, but Malden & Jenkins hired me, and we started the tax controversy resolution team so that Malden & Jenkins can help their taxpayers through the notices, through the procedures, through the audits, anything that comes from the IRS, and make sure it's handled. So when a client gets a notice, when a taxpayer gets a notice, they're scared. What they need to do is they need to know, don't be scared. Something's wrong. Let's figure it out. So why would you get a notice? Well, maybe you made a mistake, okay? Maybe you filed something late. Maybe you paid something late, okay? Maybe you left out some information that was required to be attached. But guess what else could be happening? You could be getting a notice because the IRS made a mistake. Mm-hmm. Maybe they made a computational error and they think you owe something that you don't. Okay. Maybe they lost a payment that you made, so they think you owe, but they've applied it to the wrong account.
Yep.
Maybe the payment you sent never got there, but you don't know it never got there. Okay. Maybe the return you think got there never got there because they're sending you missing return notices. So the only thing is, you don't panic. You reach out to someone that can help you, and I'm getting a notice because there's something off, and let's figure out what it is. Very important thing is, because there's other notices that come besides the penalty notices, you always want to respond immediately. Don't hold on to that notice for 6 months, because that causes more difficulty.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's not frustrating for people, but we'll sometimes get notices from clients, and it's, hey, we got this a month ago, and it kind of constricts your ability to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
The later on in life. And so can you kind of talk about that timing, that progression, right? Like what are the real dates, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Can you kind of talk through, hey, what are some important dates to consider when you get this notice?
So the important date to consider is, that's a very good point. Some notices will say 30 days to respond. Mm-hmm. Some notices will say 60 days to respond. Some notices will say 14 days to respond, okay?
Yeah.
So the important thing is, when you get that notice, you look and see, what is the date on the notice? And you go to that. What am I talking about? Is it a 1040? What am I talking about?
Yeah.
And the last thing you want to know is, when am I supposed to respond?
Yep.
Okay. So if you see the date on the notice and it says 14 days from now, you want to do it. 30 days from now, you get help. Then if you say there's impossible to do 14 days, as long as you contact the IRS and you let them know, hey, I've gotten the notice. I'm not ignoring you. I need a little bit more time. What happens is when you ignore that notice, so if they gave you 30 days and you didn't deal with it for 60 days, you've missed some time limit, okay? And the IRS is on alert that you're non-responsive, okay? And so they don't deal with you the same way as if you walk in immediately say, I have this issue. Let's figure out how to fix it.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I that's always been my experience. It's like, hey, when you're more forthcoming, when you're more communicative
Yes.
with them, that they're more willing to deal with you and help you. So let's take a step back and say, okay, I get a notice from the IRS or any authority, right? Any state or whatever that says I owe a penalty.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I owe it or not. You
Yeah.
know, and so what are, your first steps are obviously, hey, get with your controversy team or your CPA or whatever. So what are my options at that point, right?
And I'm going to digress a little bit and explain when you said they're more communicative with you. The problem is it can get deeper than that because we have taxpayers that hold on to notices sometimes and just either they're scared or they're busy.
Yeah.
Okay. And all of that we're dealing with life. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why we are here to help if you need us to, because we will deal with that immediately. You can move that aside and deal with the rest of the life. But what happens is, let's say you waited 6 months and all of a sudden you're getting this notice from collections, okay,
Yep.
that says, hey, we want your money or we're going to levy on you. And then we have that situation where they'll come to us, okay? Well, then we have a different issue because, which we're about to talk about initial responses.
yep.
We no longer can do the initial response. We now are talking to collections and putting holds and saying, hey, please don't levy on them. Then we're talking to the IRS because they don't talk to each other
Yep.
and trying to deal with the issue. Okay. But then they're mad because collections is involved and it becomes more costly for the taxpayer as well because we're navigating two different issues.
Yeah. So talk through that progression, right? Where usually when you get a first notice, you're getting something that's assessed to you, but they're not actively trying to collect it because they expect you to pay, right? So
Yes.
that's usually the best time to
Well,
deal
the
with
best
it.
thing to say is they expect you to pay or disagree. So now we'll get into the notices, exactly what you said.
Yeah.
So when you get a notice, it says, hey, Mr. Taxpayer, we're looking at this for your 1040. We are assessing $17,000. Oh, we're assessing $120,000. We had one that they were assessing $2.7 million. Okay. So whatever it is, you don't worry about the number. Okay. I had to learn that real quick because guess what? It's the same tax law.
Right.
Whether it's 10,000 or 2.7 million, you have to go in and figure out what went wrong and how we can fix it. So when you get that notice, you've got to respond. What it will say on that notice is, and that's why it is more complicated. It is better to get someone involved so that they can figure out the steps to get it fixed.
Yep.
Because I have a lot of people that they try to fix it themselves, and then they come to us and say, oops, we didn't get to fix it. No, and it just happens. And I don't
Yeah.
blame
No,
them for trying. But then what happens is they get denied. When they get denied, we'll talk about it later, but then we have to go to a whole nother level of appeals, okay? And it becomes more costly. It comes a 2-year period. So the first thing you do is you get that notice, and it will tell you, here's why you've got the notice. Here's what we're looking at. Here's why we've assessed something. And there's all kinds of, I'm trying to make it layperson talk, but it's all different code sections that you may get it, whether you were late, whether you didn't pay, whether it was for a 1040, whether it was because a W-2 wasn't filed.
Yep.
All kinds
Payroll
of
tax
penalties.
returns, any sort of tax
payroll
returns, not
tax
just income
returns.
tax. So,
Yeah, not just income taxes. So each one have codes in the IRS that internal revenue code is what they have to assess the penalty under. So that's when we have to come in and we have to look at it and see, okay, how can we respond? And there's a different rule of how you respond depending on the code section. So what the letter will say is, here's your penalty, here's the code section, here's what you owe. You can pay, and they tell you where to pay, which is what they'd love you to do. But then on every single letter, there's a section that says, if you disagree, here's what you do. And then it will say, if you disagree for reasonable cause, and of course, the only thing it will tell you is if you disagree because you had a disaster or you had a death in the family or serious illness, you can have reasonable cause. We know there's other reasons, but that's all they'll tell you. So all we're saying is when you get that notice, you decide, do I agree and I want to pay it, or do I disagree? If you disagree, contact us and we'll help you go from there.
Yeah, and so let's take it. Let's kind of go down two roads, right? Let's say I disagree because I have reasonable cause, not because I don't owe it or something.
Yes.
Like so. What are my options to request removal of those penalties? Just because hey, I either had reasonable cause, and maybe talk about first time abatement a little bit,
Yes.
and what that means, and
Okay.
Sometimes it's administratively easy to get rid of penalties. Sometimes maybe you don't want to use first time abatement. So, and maybe now even the IRS is kind of automatically applying this. So I think it'd be good to just kind of go through that landscape and what all that means.
Okay. So if you get a notice and you disagree, you can disagree for a lot of reasons of just, I don't want to pay this. Do my facts allow me out of this?
Yep.
And that's okay. And one thing I want to point out is, of course, everyone's scared of the IRS. And everyone sees the IRS as, oh my gosh, they're the enemy. And they've come out after me and assess this. Okay. My TCR team does not see it that way. And that's why we are successful.
Yeah.
My TCR team sees the IRS as we are part of the same team. They're my team member. You know why I say that? I cannot go into the IRS and push the button. Without them to push the button and allow the penalties to be removed, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
You got to go to court. So they are my team member, and we've got to be patient, and we've got to explain the law to them. You've got to understand that all of these agents that are sitting there, whether they get the letter or whether you do the phone call or correspondence, they are sitting there, and they're not assigned by being trained to a certain penalty or a certain matter. Every single one is new to them. So I've been told by multiple agents that a lot of the penalty removal is because they don't understand it. And you've got people calling in and they're just saying, hey, and this is professionals calling in and saying, hey, remove my penalties. And they're like, well, I can't.
Yeah. Why? How?
So instead, we give them the code, we give them the law, we give them the reasons, we give them the analysis, and we teach them why, in the end, basically, our answer is the correct one, and the penalties need to be removed. So when you get a letter and you decide, let's look at it, the first thing you would look at is there are certain sections that allow penalty removal based on first-time abatement. Not everything can, but just certain ones do. And like failure to file, failure to pay for a 1040, for example, or a partnership. And so what you can do is you can call them. A lot of people think, oh, let's write in. Well, if you write in, that's going to take 6 months before they read the correspondence.
Yep.
So my philosophy is our team says, no, we want to call in, because if we can do it immediately, we don't want to wait 6 months. First-time abatement means if you've had no penalties assessed in the last 3 years for the exact same subject matter, then they will, if you fall under the FTA, they will remove the penalty.
Right.
Okay. The reason you want to call is, first of all, it's quicker. But second of all, if you wait the 6 months, so that's something our team has now established. But if you wait the 6 months and you get denied, then 6 months later, you're just starting to deal with reasonable cause. If we get the denial over the phone, same day we're dealing with reasonable cause. So it shortens the time period. So the next thing is reasonable cause. What does that mean? It just means that for penalties, reasonable cause looks at the facts and circumstances of every single taxpayer. And they look at the scenario. That means they look at what notices came in. They look at how you respond. So if I've got a taxpayer that waited a year to get me, yes, we're dealing with collections, but also I'm dealing with a factual scenario that they did not respond for a year. Whereas if I have someone that tried to respond to every notice and didn't.
It's just a better fact pattern.
It's a
because
very...
You're communicating. It's like, hey, I want to resolve this, not I'm ignoring this.
Not I'm ignoring this. So what reasonable cause means is better fact pattern, because it's how would a reasonable person act? Did you act with ordinary care? Did you do everything that you could in order to try to get things right? I have one scenario where, and this was the $2.7 million one, but we have probably at least 50 clients that were in this situation, and it wasn't something we prepared. It was all those insurance forms, 1095Cs, that was new for businesses, and so they filed the insurance forms. Well, anyway, it was a new law. and they didn't understand the law, and they made a mistake, and they filed. And first of all, they didn't realize they were supposed to file. Then they found out they were supposed to file. Then they made a mistake, and they filed. But they didn't check to see if it was accepted because they got something that says, hey, we got it. They thought that meant accepted. Okay. 4 years later, because they were in the middle of COVID, they get notices. And not only did they say, hey, we're doing penalties, they found out they've never been filed. Okay.
Yep.
So we are literally filing something 4 years late. Okay. So we are asking for reasonable cause, and we are having to say the taxpayer made a mistake. They forgot to check. They are 4 years late. They have penalties 3 years. And when you do it 3 years, they say, we'll only do it for 1 year. They were ignorant of the law and didn't realize they were supposed to check. So all of those things that they're saying, here's why we're denying, guess what? They were right on every single one. Okay. But we went through the facts and circumstances. We went through everything, and we explained to them. We responded to this notice. We didn't do this one, but the minute we knew, we fixed it. And so we
took action.
Went through all the scenario and explained that. And then we pulled out our last thing that was a 1999 Treasury report that said, hey, Treasury, Congress wants you to distinguish between negligent and non-negligent mistakes. Okay. So I went to the agent and I said, I know you said we made a mistake, but I need you to see what Congress has his intent. And they were like, oh, okay, let's let this 2.7 million go. So that's what we can provide for taxpayers, is just the ability to work it through so that by the time we're finished, the IRS can agree with us and think it was their idea.
Just see the whole perspective. And,
Yes.
and I think, and that's a great example of, hey, how broad reasonable cause can be, right? If you, and it's funny, just going back to first time abatement, it's funny how quickly that can work, where they are just pressing a button on the other line and they said, oh, it went through, you're abated. But to start that reasonable cause process immediately after that is something a prudent taxpayer would do.
Yes.
And just working through that with clients and in y'all's relationships with the IRS, I think is what's paramount, right? Is, hey, we're not adversaries. We are working with you to help us both, establish a reasonable cause and make sure we're interpreting this issue correctly.
Yeah, and that's a good way to put it, because actually what I tell them, I said, what we're doing is working to find the right answer. If the answer, whatever it is, and so we work through the facts and circumstances to find the right answer. Another reasonable cause is to explain, we've talked about filing late, explain paying late. Okay, we have that a lot with 1040s, 1120, not partnerships, but 1040s, but then also 11 with corporate returns.
Corporates, yeah.
But we have it a lot with payroll returns, which, okay, everyone says it is impossible to get penalties removed for payroll returns, okay, because you're dealing with trust fund money. And the IRS takes that very seriously. And what I mean by that is trust fund money, just to explain to everybody else, trust fund money means you're dealing with the employees withholding.
Well, this is Social Security, and
And
this
the
is
Social
this
Security.
is things that
So
get passed
you're
out to.
holding that in trust. And I've had 8 revenue officers explain to me, not only is it the trust fund money, the IRS has to go ahead and pay it out. So they have lended it out
Yep.
for you, and now you owe it to them. Okay.
right.
So it's very important. So we deal with that a lot. We had one issue that was 1.5 million, dealt with the reasonable cause, got rid of that. We had another one was dealing with about 800,000. That issue was they were 1 day late. 1 day late. Okay. $800,000 for being 1 day late. And so they denied it. And so then they denied it at the initial level, and we were supposed to go to appeals. Well, our position is, and we got them fully removed, but our position was we explained the facts and circumstances. Their situation was actually they had gotten hacked. So we explained the situation that they got hacked, and so they had to redo their computer. When they redid their computer, something happened, and the computer defaulted to the old situation. Once it defaulted to the old situation, they were late. They didn't find out about this for about 6 months because the IRS didn't send notices. We explained that. We say, if you would let us know earlier, we would have known. But then the minute they knew, the next day they changed their system.
Yep.
So when the IRS understood the entire facts, and under the facts and circumstances, they acted reasonably. And we say this a lot in our correspondence. The taxpayer did everything they could possibly do. Each time they knew it, they acted responsibly before, and then they acted responsible after they became aware. and then that is how it's removed.
Well, I want to hit that home, right? Because it is just, hey, and for anybody listening, right, it's, hey, and you said this right at the beginning, it's when you get notices, don't ignore them, because how you act after you get that notice is just as important as how you acted beforehand. And so keeping that in mind as, hey, I want to work through this, and, we'll obviously help you work through it as best we can. And you kind of touched on this a minute ago about appeals and all that. I mean, let's take our first case further down the road of, hey, I've got a penalty notice, couldn't get first time abatement. Reasonable cause didn't work for whatever reason. Is that where appeals comes in? Like, what are my other options after reasonable cause is denied at the first level? Take me to the next step.
Your other options, and just so you know, when you mentioned being, you had to be mindful and you had to act responsible before and after, there is actually a provision, and we quote it a lot, in the IRS penalty handbook that says we will focus on how you acted before and how you acted after. So what you just said is very important. So what happens?
Who knew?
Yeah.
That was going to be spot on, right?
Yeah. So you think you've done this before.
Yeah.
So what happens when all of a sudden you get denied? Okay. Well, if you get denied, first of all, we have a way that while we're dealing with it, if we realize it's going to be stuck and maybe they're not looking at it correctly, we can also get, and that's a step that we would do before we go to appeals. There's something called Taxpayer Advocate Service.
Yep.
Okay. So I want to bring that up. We call it TAS, and we are very involved with them. We will go to places where we can actually, when we have something that is very stuck, we'll go to places where we know that they will have a live meeting and in person. So we will come with our suitcases.
Yeah, IRS conferences, seminars,
IRS
whatever.
conferences.
Yep.
There's a conference in New York. So there's certain ones that you can go, and we will bring maybe 8 each, and it'll be our most difficult that maybe we've been dealing with for 2 years, or it's been a year, and then all of a sudden they get to us. So I have a good example of taxpayer advocate. We've talked to a couple of law firms that cannot believe we got this resolved. We cannot believe that we didn't have to do a refund suit. So I want to explain that's one of the reasons Malden & Jenkins has gotten a tax controversy resolution team, so that our taxpayers aren't having to sue the IRS over issues that we can help them get resolved. So we had 2 refunds.
But before I go into that, because I do think it's very special that, when we're talking about the IRS, it's like we're dealing with this big body, but we're really dealing with people, and the relationships y'all have established in the taxpayer advocate office, right, has helped, and I know you're about to talk through this, right?
Yeah.
So has helped push through things that other people can't, right? And so, I think understanding that, hey, it kind of is a relationship business to a degree, just to help you push through things that should get pushed through, but it's useful for the client to get a refund or a penalty abated in year
Very
1
useful.
versus year 4, right? So,
Very useful to
so-
explain our relationship. And it's because Malden & Jenkins is putting an investment into us for the client, okay? And so they're allowing us to go to these places that we now have a personal relationship, not only with the Taxpayer Advocate Service, but we have a relationship with the National Taxpayer Advocate, Karen Collins.
Yep.
If I need something, I can email her. I don't do that often, okay? It's got to be something I've only done it twice, okay? So it's got to be something very rare. But then also when we go up there, she knows the only thing we take, we have tried every single way to do it. So I have an example of the relationships we've built. There was a taxpayer, actually we had 2 different taxpayers that were owed refunds, okay, about $300,000 each. And it had been a year, and they never got their refund.
No movement, right.
Okay. And so, of course, you can't just go to taxpayer advocate because, hey, I want to jump in line. You have to show we have undue hardship because we've tried everything.
Right.
So our CPA tried to do it themselves. Okay. And so then this spring reached out to our team and said, hey, we can't get the refund. Can you help us? So then we don't just jump to taxpayer advocate. We say, okay, we're going to try. So then we did it for about 2 or 3 months, and then we discovered that it was stuck in some department because it was labeled as, and that's what people need to know. You never know why yours is stuck. Okay, it's not just because you did something wrong. It could be because the IRS did something wrong. And which I told you at the beginning.
Yeah.
You don't know what that notice is. It was stuck because it was marked as a frivolous return. Okay, so there we are.
And even the IRS agent sometimes doesn't know why it's marked.
And they had no idea. And we explained and we worked with it. And they said, once it's marked as frivolous, we are not allowed to work this. And I said, so are you telling me this is stuck forever? And the IRS agent actually advised me and said, no, I'm telling you that your taxpayer needs to sue the IRS for a refund. And I said, okay, so you want to sue your boss. You know what I mean? And so, but anyway, he was saying it's never going to come out of here.
Yeah.
Okay. And he was right. So what we did was we do the form and we applied for the taxpayer advocate. And so we got a notice and we were already going to New York for one of ours, take the most important cases and that are just stuck. And the day before we were going, and these people weren't on the list because we had already done our request and you have to do it in order. So these people were on the list and all of a sudden we got a notice from Taz, very timely, and it said, hey, Taz, taxpayer advocate, is not allowed to accept this case because it is marked as frivolous. And so then I turned to one of my team members and I said, let's prepare the documents. We got to take this to Taz in person. So we get there. And so we've divided up, and I thought that was an easier one because some were more complicated to explain. And so I gave it to my associate and just said, hey, tell them it can't be fixed unless they help us. So once we finished and we got back together, the manager had come over and explained, hey, we can't accept this because it's frivolous.
Right.
So there we are. And we're like, we're going to get this fixed.
Like there's got to be a path forward.
Well, we knew there was a path.
Right.
Okay. And so what we did, and so we do have relationships, and those relationships are important. So then we hightailed it to a meeting that we knew the National Taxpayer Advocate was going to be speaking at. And so then when she got off the stage, of course, walked up to her and said, hey, I've got an issue, and I hate to do this to you, but you're the only one that can help. And she said, come see me after. So then we explained, and and the thing is with Malden and Jenkins, we take all the steps first, and so they take that seriously. Yep. So we showed her the letter that they denied it. Then we showed her the letter that Taz denied us. Then Maggie explained that the manager denied us, and that the manager said to reach out to the Congress. And so then the National Taxpayer Advocate said, and then the Congress is going to send you to me. And we said, exactly. So with that, she said, let me help your taxpayer. And in less than 2 months, she had one of her advocates. She did assign it to an advocate herself. She oversaw it. And in less than 2 months, the advocate reached out to the IRS and said, there is nothing frivolous about this return. And we even include you on this. If you remember this summer, we had you look because we also wanted to do everything and see if we saw anything that looked unusual. And we had already done that, but we had you do that. And so we do our homework. And so anyway, 6 weeks later, we got something that said the IRS was going to release it, and they got their full refund. So the relationships do help, and that's how Taz, and that prevented us from going to appeals or to tax court.
Or to court, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it is. It's great seeing I mean, obviously, you guys have a good handle on the practice and procedure, and seeing the progression and using the relationships when you need them. It's just great that we have those ability to kind of say, hey, we've done everything we can.
Yes.
We really need your help. And, again,
and every other lawyer's there, I mean, that's what she's there for, and that's what we're there for.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And so I think, again, just seeing y'all's team be able to work through all that and everything has been good. I do want to switch gears a little bit and kind of talk. We've kind of talked about notices and
you want me to explain appeals? What would be the next step, real quick?
I think that'd be great.
Okay, because you had done that and then I pulled off. Yeah. So if you get denied and Taz can't help you and you get denied and you move on, the next step is you don't just have to pay. You basically decide, I disagree with the IRS's position. So if you go to appeals, they're called the Independent Office of Appeals. And their position, and the first thing in their letter is it says, hey, we are here to reach a settlement. So they will look at the hazards of litigation, and they will determine, okay, is the IRS more likely to win 60%? Are you likely to win 40%? It's very rare that they find 100% for either case, okay? I will say in our 4 years in appeals, and I've done 31 appeals now, I've had 100% resolution.
That's what I was going to ask.
Taxpayer.
Yeah.
Okay. But, and I've been told by a former IRS agent, that's a big law firm, he said, wow, what you do is risky. And I said, I don't consider it risky. It's honest. I I believe in being honest, okay? And so the first thing I will tell appeals is, I need you to know I am not looking for a settlement. I am looking for full resolution. And what I'm going to do is during our conference, I'm going to go over the facts and circumstances. And when we're done, I am going to prove that under these facts and circumstances and the law and the analysis that applies, the taxpayer fully deserves penalty removal, and the hazards of litigation are fully in service. And that can't happen. I'm not going to say that can happen every time, but so far it has, because we have our plan, we make sure we figure it out, and also we are able to show the response, okay? I right now have not had to deal with a situation where someone hasn't responded for 2 years. Okay, I've had lots of those, but luckily I've been able to resolve those at the
Before
initial
appeals,
level, before appeals. And so anyway, so appeals basically comes in, they look at it, they decide, and then what happens if they were to decide, like we had one where they decided 65% for us and 35% for the IRS. So I requested a conference, and they said, okay, you see all that, and now you're going to agree to this, and you see what I said. And I said, yes, ma'am. I just sent you something in writing 5 minutes ago, so let's look at it. And so then we went through different things, and we went through her concerns. I said, tell me what your concerns are, because if you had them, that means we had them in getting through that point. And so then again, we're a team member. We work through those concerns. We explain how we got to that point. Because to me, it's a black and white thing. If you did it, there's a reason. And then it gets settled. If someone was not settled at appeals, if they were denied, I just want to explain that scenario. If someone were denied at appeals and it was in the favor of the IRS, or it was a settlement they didn't agree with, there are other options. They wouldn't pursue that with us, but they could go to tax court and sue. Yes, just wanted to point that out.
And so, have you ever been to tax court, just out of curiosity?
Well, no, because I have always settled.
You've always settled.
Yeah.
And you're 100%.
I've always had full resolution.
100% success rate.
Yes.
Haven't had to go to
and 31 appeals.
Which is pretty amazing.
I mean, I've had 31 appeals.
Yeah. Wow.
But most of them, and that's over 30 years, so we don't do appeals much, you know. But most of them we can resolve at the initial level.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked a lot about notices and kind of dealing with that. I mean, does the controversy team, do y'all support? Can we talk through audits? You know, I mean, because it's kind of a different subsect of dealing with the IRS. You know, a lot of the correspondence. I mean, people don't realize this, but a lot of it's automatic. You know, and just kind of the nature of dealing with that is a little bit different than the nature of dealing with an audit. Can you kind of talk through the controversy team's kind of audit process, supporting taxpayers from that perspective? What happens when, hey, I just got notified to be an audit? What's the first thing that we need to be thinking about there? And
so basically what will happen is, of course, it will come to your partner, whoever is in charge of the client. And so they will get with us. And basically, it kind of becomes a team effort, because what we do is we manage the process. We make sure we get all the IDRs timely. We make sure it's understandable. One of the things is we make sure, we have literally an outline for them. We have a cover page to everyone. Everything. I have agents that say, wow, you did all the work for us. Okay. You make it easy for them. You make it understandable for them. You make them see they've gotten everything they requested. I cannot tell you how many times I've been told, we never get everything we requested. Okay. We do it the first time. Again, they're more favorable, and when they know you're working with them. The other thing is, our job is not only to help with the correspondence, but it's very important that we represent the taxpayer. We make sure that the IRS, it's in the manual where it says, if you can, even if there's a POA involved, we found this in the manual. It's called the Internal Revenue Manual. Okay, that is,
which basically talks about how the IRS is supposed to, supposed to act, supposed to interpret things,
It's the instruction manual for the agents of how to do that. Okay, it's not really for us. We do the code, but it's the instruction manual. And so there is a section in there that actually says, if you can, try to get with the taxpayer and talk to them alone. Okay, and we were on an audit, and so I'm very aware of that. I tell them, hey, when we go in and you have to answer the questions, if I don't like a question that's asked, or if you're not sure of it, I will butt in and say, okay, wait, why are you asking? Let me clarify this. And so we protect the taxpayer to make sure this Only the right questions are being asked. Also, you've got to make sure they don't do a fishing expedition. What that means is if they're doing a 1040 and then all of a sudden they start asking for other questions at the initial level, they can ask more information if they discover something in your first. But we had a situation where someone got to me and they said, hey, I need help. They're asking me questions about the partnerships.
Right, trying to open up new cases, basically.
Yes, and basically saying, you have to give me every partnership return that you were done. And so it was very timely, again, with connections. I was going to a conference with all tax controversy litigators, and there was actually a past IRS commissioner there that was speaking. I got up to them. I talked to him on behalf of this client, and I said, hey, I need you to know what they're asking. We haven't even had the first meeting. And he said, oh, this is phishing. You need to refuse. You need to tell them they can't ask for that. And so we did. So they got their manager involved, and they said, no, we can't ask for that. And I said, okay, let me show you everything that it says you can ask for. So I gave them the IRM and I said, I am only going to give you what I see that you can ask for. So if you show me in writing that you can also ask for that, so that's how we protect them. And then, 24 hours later, they said, yeah, we're not going to be asking for that right now. And so that's kind of how we do it. But then another example is we had to do a tour. We were walking through. Next thing I knew, the agent had pulled the taxpayer away. And we had 3 different taxpayers
A tour
there.
of the taxpayer
A tour of the
office,
taxpayer's
right?
facility.
Yeah.
Sometimes they ask for that. So they had pulled one of the taxpayers, was starting to ask them questions. I got over there and I had to assign during the tour the 3 of us to each individual to make sure it doesn't happen. And these are rare circumstances, but it's an example. And then one more example, and an agent went in the wrong direction, and all of a sudden I'm looking at the 2 CPA partners, and they're like, no, no, no. And finally, he was talking about the wrong thing and saying we did something on the return that we didn't. Let's say he was saying we were cash basis and we were accrual basis. He was interpreting everything wrong, and we had to stop him. We had to pull everything and say, your interpretation is wrong. So we just protect them, because if they're doing it on their own.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important to have representation in any penalties aside, but certainly any audit, right? Because a taxpayer's answer to a technical question doesn't necessarily jive with the actual tax or technical answer, right? And so I think being there is just being in their corner as, hey, either A, you don't have to answer this or provide this, or and B, just, hey, let's make sure we make sure the response is accurate and technically correct before we just provide this to the IRS. So just kind of that first line of defense there, I think it's been good.
And your point was good, because our team is providing support to their CPA, because their CPA's job is to go into the tax return that they prepared and provide all that information. And so we then can come in and help with the other technical things of, wait, they're going too far, they can't do that. And so we can work as a team to protect the taxpayer.
Well, yeah, just applying all that policy and procedure perspective, pardon the alliteration, to the whole audit, and making sure they're operating within the confines of what they're supposed to be operating in.
Yes.
And it's surprising how, not how often, but sometimes they'll just overreach just because they don't know, right? Because IRS agents are still learning, and especially now they're kind of cut a little bit, their budget's cut, and so I guess talk a little bit more about that, right? I mean, we're talking about an IRS, agency that's kind of been cut down a little bit, and government shut down every now and then. How is it working with them now? Is it different? Is it more difficult?
It works well for us because of our team policy. We are very respectful to agents. We understand what they're going through. The shutdown happened, and we spent 2 weeks apologizing to agents for what they went through as we started, okay? And they appreciate that respect. Yeah. We don't come in and just make demands. I had an appeal that got canceled. Everybody else, the auditor was telling me, or the appeals agent was telling me, was just screaming and saying when we're going to get scheduled, okay? And I was last on the list. We were supposed to be, it was 40 days, and we were day 41, like the day after. And so I kept on telling her, I don't want to do this until you're ready. I understand that this may not be able to be done for a while. Please understand. Yes, my client, client has waited 2.5 years, but I also understand the difficulties you're dealing with.
Right.
And
They're people too.
yes, we're a team. And guess what she did? She called me and she said, I need you to pick a date. She goes, because I want you having first choice.
Yeah.
Okay. And she said, because I'm worried that the end of the January, they weren't accepting any until January 6th. And then we took the January 6th. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, and she said, I'm worried that there could be another shutdown at into January, mm-hmm. and I don't want you filing. So one of the things we do is we're very respectful for that. And we're just very understanding. You've got to understand they're down. Mm-hmm. They've lost, colleagues. It's hard when people will call and think, wow, you've been on vacation for 40 days. No, I didn't have pay for 40 days. I was stressed. And so we just, again, see them as a teammate, and no different than if I walked in and knew you had been on leave for 40 days because of an emergency, whatever it is, and I ran into you, I'd say, hey, how are you?
Yeah.
We do the same thing with them.
Right.
And it's a respect situation, and for that reason, we've had no difficulties. It may take longer, but it was already taking a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that approach, just combined with y'all's just intimate knowledge of what to do at every step of the way, has been great to see, and I think your track record speaks to it, right? I mean, we're penalties are abated left and right, and appeals and refunds are handled in as timely a manner as they can be. Mm-hmm. And so just having somebody there that knows the ins and outs, like you and your team, I think has been a huge asset to the firm and our clients. So if I'm taking away anything from this, it's, hey, let's be proactive. Don't be scared. Mm-hmm. When we get a notice, we know what to do. Please reach out to us, and we can hold your hand every step of the way, to the extent you need it. So anything else to add or anything else to take away?
And same thing for an audit. It's scary, and it's a pain.
Yeah.
Okay. And I tell the clients that. I was telling my own clients that, it is a pain, but the way I explain it is just a part of being in business.
Being a taxpayer. That's
and
right.
being a taxpayer. If you are signing this, and if you're submitting tax returns, either 1040s or business returns, then that means they are going to have to audit, or else if they don't audit anybody, then everybody can put whatever they want. And so it's just a nature of being in business. And so what you do is you don't worry about it. You make sure you apply, and you can't really have the fear, but you just know you've got to respond. And in the end, it's all going to be okay. The one thing I explain to my taxpayers, we're going to make sure they don't ask more than they can, that they're asking within the confines, that they're asking the right questions, that we're giving the right answers. So if everything is done right, then it's all okay, and we get a clean bill of health. I've had so many that they end up getting a refund because as the taxpayer is digging for information, they go, oh, I just found these receipts I forgot to give you.
Could be a happy accident.
And so that has happened to me. And also with audits, you need to know people aren't necessarily aware of this. A lot of our people weren't aware of this. And I've got the experience is if the agent is not doing right, and you know it, you can ask to speak to a manager, and you can get the manager involved. And at one time, I actually had to close the whole thing out, go to a manager, and they had us owing about $150,000 for 2 different years. And it was all wrong. So we went to the manager and didn't have to go to appeals. You have a right to go to a manager first and not go to appeals. So it's knowing all those ins and outs, which we do.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. So we went to the manager. When we finished, guess what? It wasn't much, but they got a refund for both years. One was $10,000 and one was $21,000.
Yeah.
And so what I explained to my taxpayer is, just like you could find something that you forgot to give us that helps you, what if you find something that hurts you, okay? Then I also say that purpose of this audit is to find the right answer. Mm-hmm. So if it is something that should have been included in the first thing, you're not losing because we're just correcting that. And so that
everybody needs to be made whole.
Yes, and so that makes them feel good. And then we explain about penalties. And so you're just trying to find the right answer as a team.
Yeah. No, I love the approach. It's been a great value add for the clients, obviously. Yeah. And I appreciate you stopping by and giving us a little more insight into it.
Okay.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. If you do have any questions or need any help, please reach out to Charlotte and the Tax Controversy Group here at Malden & Jenkins or visit mjcpa.com. Thanks.